Time now for the award-winning #1 local talk show in Northeast Pennsylvania, The Sam Lesante Show. Now here's your host, Sam Lesante.
So folks, he writes a book about the 1%, a letter to the 1% in the country. And it's interesting because he says this is a letter to the 1%. Is exactly what it sounds like, a letter to the richest 1% of American households. It's a call to action, a plea for compassion, and a manifesto for the future. My guest is Anthony W. Orlando, and he is no stranger to Northeastern Pennsylvania. Anthony, thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
You're a remarkable individual. I know you, since you were an altar boy at St. John Bosco, and you come from a great family. And I saw your career, what you've done, Tell me a little bit about yourself. You went to MMI here in Freeland, okay? Tell me what your thoughts were when you were at MMI, what you wanted to do, and then we'll talk about where you are today.
Sure. Well, I'd always been fascinated with politics and with economics, even when I was at MMI. I would study those issues a lot. I wanted to go into something related to economics. I went to Penn, went to Wharton to study business and finance, because that's where my focus was. And it turned out to be a perfect time really to be there, because that was right when the financial crisis was happening. And a lot of people were asking questions that we didn't have the answers to, but at places like Wharton we had a lot of bright minds trying to figure it out. And that's really what got me interested in trying to understand what was happening to our economy and how we could make things better for a lot of people, which led me to writing this book.
Okay, so what was your interest in the economy? Okay, what was the reason why you focused on the economy? Because, you talk to, financial experts or whomever, and everyone has different ideas, solutions, et cetera, et cetera. Before you answer that question, let me ask this, be current. Where do you think we are now in our economy?
I think things are better now than they were a few years ago. The unemployment rate has gone down, the economy has been growing. I think it could be doing a lot better. I think there are a lot of people who are hurting. There are over 20 million Americans who either are unemployed or underemployed, meaning that they would like to have a full-time job and they're only working part-time. Wages have basically stayed flat since the beginning of the recession. Household income has barely grown more than inflation for the last 25 years. There are a lot of people who are doing very well, but for the average American household, it's hard to keep up with the rising cost of education, healthcare, things like this. So, yeah, I think we've turned a corner in one sense. We are doing better than we were in the depths of the recession, but there are a lot of problems that need fixing.
Okay, I'm going to get back to this. So, what was your interest in when you left MMI? What did you went to school, and then what did you proceed to do?
So it was really a lot of issues like this that interested me. There seemed to be a lot of challenges that people didn't know how to solve. And the economy interests me because it affects everyone's life, our day-to-day lives, everything we do. Everything that's here on this set was made by somebody working at some company, and that company had to figure out how to make these things, how to employ those people, and all those decisions that all those people make day in and day out for all these little things add up to the bigger lifestyle that we all can afford to have. And so that really is what interested me. So I went to Penn, I studied that. Then I went to the London School of Economics and got a master's in economic history. Because one of the things that I realized during the financial crisis was that a lot of people didn't understand how we got into this situation. And to understand that, you've got to understand history. And history teaches us that this sort of thing has happened many times before. So we can learn lessons from why it keeps happening and how we can prevent it from being so bad in the future.
There is such a thing as cause and effect.
Yep.
Okay, so when you look at, I can only look at me with being in the business that I have. Okay, what incentives do we have? What stimulates the economy? What makes things happen? We've had successful periods in our economy with different presidents. Okay, because they felt that the more money you put into the system, the better off we would be in stimulating people to create jobs and do something like that. So what are your thoughts about that?
I think that
Without becoming politically.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah. I think that one thing that we can all agree on is there are important things that the government has to do. We need our roads. We need our army. We want to have a good social security system for our elderly. Where it becomes controversial is in deciding how much the government should invest in those things. But I think the other thing that we all can agree on is that the free market has been a wonderful way of creating productivity in the economy and creating jobs for the vast majority of Americans. So we don't want to hurt that either. It's about striking the right balance. It's a very difficult thing to do. It's one of the things that I really wrestle with in the book. What is that balance?
Well, here again, going back before we address the 1%, okay, we're looking at, I said about the incentives. When you have people who are just dependent on the government, okay, I think there are millions of people who are depending on the government that I feel should be working, okay. We have an attitude in our country today as, well, I can make more sitting home than going to work, okay. Well, who made them that way? The government, to me, gave them all of this information, so you don't have to worry about, you know, paying for food because you have access cards, and and we need the people who are in need. We should be helping. Right. The problem I see, Anthony, is where people are losing their incentive because you have all this stuff that there are. I mean, if I went on the phone today and I called the different employment agencies here, they have jobs available for 100, 200 people. Well, why aren't these people working? They don't want to take those jobs. How do you feel about that?
I think it's a problem. I certainly think there are a number of people who are dependent on the government. I tend to think that there are other problems that are even more important. You talk about incentives. One incentive that strikes me as particularly important for businessmen like yourself is you want consumers. That's the biggest incentive. The more consumers you have, the more production you can have, the more things you can create and send out to all those people. And the problem with today's economy is that the average middle-class household doesn't have the money to spend on consumption. They don't have the money to buy as many products as they used to. Nick Hanauer, who's a very wealthy entrepreneur, who I quote in the book, he was one of the original investors in Amazon.com and one of these Silicon Valley guys. He's made a lot of money, but he's concerned about inequality too. And one of the reasons he says is, if workers' wages and incomes had kept up with the growth in productivity, had grown at the same rate as, say, the 1% over the last 30 years, the average middle-class household would have $15,000 more per year than they currently do. Imagine how much better our economy would be then. Imagine how much more our businesses could sell to them. That, I think, is really the fundamental problem that we have to try to address. And you're right, you can't solve that with welfare or anything like that. But I think there are things that the government can do to help. Investing more in infrastructure, raising the minimum wage, things that the vast majority of Americans do support. Not welfare, but helping people who are working.
Well, the government could also hurt.
Yes.
Okay,
sure.
In terms of energy, for example. If you're looking right now, the average cost per gallon of gas is now maybe about $2.60. I saw today $2.53. I personally think it should be like $1.50. Okay, but when you have that energy cost coming down, you have a domino effect, I think. So now people have more disposable income. All right. So, but if you continue to tax energy cost, all right, like in some cases Obama wants to do with the coal industry, you affect a lot of people, okay? Now, politics does play a part in this, okay? Where do we go as a society, okay, in terms of keeping the incentive, entrepreneurism, okay? It seems like entrepreneurism is dead to a degree. Why is that?
Well, I think part of it is, you know, the thing that I was talking about where people don't have as much money to spend. I mean, if you're going to create a company, you want to make sure that there are enough consumers out there to buy your products. When the economy is weak and there aren't enough people buying things, you don't have enough consumers to even break even, let alone make a profit. I think you're raising an important point. I think the cost of gas and energy is something that is really important to people, along with the cost of education and healthcare. And these things have been growing much faster than their incomes have been growing over the past 30 years or so, which is why I say we need to be raising their incomes. We need to be talking about things like raising the minimum wage, you know, having big companies pay a livable wage to these people, and the government can invest, I think, in smart things. I don't want to see the government overtaxing, but I would like to see the government investing in the energy technologies of the future rather than giving subsidies to oil and gas companies, which they're currently doing. I don't think that's the best way to solve the problem. And while I do agree that I would like to see gas prices lower, as we all would, since we have to pay at the pump, the one thing that we do have to weigh against that is the costs of things that are damaging to the environment, the costs of pollution. I mean, this is actual dollars. This isn't like tree-hugging hippie stuff. You know, a lot of people don't realize, but there's been a lot of very good research done showing that pollution coming from oil and coal and so on, it gets into our lungs, it has costs to our medical system, it increases the risk of asthma for children. You know, we've been talking in the Pennsylvania area, certain parts with the Marcellus Shale, you talk about fracking. We don't know what the costs of these are, but we know that there's the possibility that they can cause, you know, contamination of water. And so I think the authorities are trying to wrestle with this cost-benefit analysis. They don't want people to pay more for energy, but they also don't want people to be paying as much as they currently are for the costs of these pollution. And, you know, I think one of the great challenges that my generation should embrace is the opportunity to create better energy, cleaner energy that will have less costs for all Americans.
Folks, I'm talking to Anthony W. Orlando, and if you want to get his book, we're going to get to the book after the break, Letter to the 1%. What does that mean, okay? You can get his book on AnthonyWOrlando.com, Amazon, or BarnesandNoble.com. We'll be back right after this. Thanks for staying with us, folks. I'm Sam Lesante. You're watching the Sam Lesante Show, and folks, thank you so much for all the great comments, especially in all the different cable systems we're on. My guest today is Anthony W. Orlando, an economist, and he is wrote a book, Letter to the 1%. Now, currently, you're teaching in California, right?
Yep, teaching in the Business and Economics College at Cal State LA.
Okay, yep. And you're working on your PhD?
Yeah, at USC in public policy.
Okay, and you sure don't want to be a priest?
Yeah, we were talking about that before the show. You know, I had thought about it. You know, you remember those days.
Oh, yes, I do. Yes, I do. We were taking bets. We have Father Orlando here. We were taking bets. All right, so what is this here, Letter to the 1%? What's this all about, this book?
Okay, so I believe that we are at a very important part in our history, which is the 1%. The richest 1% of American households have a great opportunity. They are, as I say in the book, the richest class of human beings in the richest country in the history of the world. That gives them a tremendous opportunity, more opportunities than, say, someone who is poor or middle class might have, to affect these things in the economy, to try to make sure that the other 99% are getting their fair share of the pie. And I think that in maybe correcting that imbalance that has gotten out of whack, where a few people are making a lot of money and everybody else isn't making as much as they'd like to, if we can correct that imbalance just a little bit, I think we can get to an economy that's growing a lot stronger and having fewer and less severe recessions.
Now, I have mixed emotions about this because, you know, I work a lot, okay? Your father, you know, he didn't achieve his success by being lazy. He took a lot of risk in life. We all take challenges and risk, okay? I had to sign my home over when we started our business, okay? If this wasn't succeeding, I was losing my home, all right? So we take these risks, all right? And sometimes people who then become successful, all right, because they work hard, you know, they're working, you know, 7 days a week, 6 days a week, and they develop some wealth. Well, now there are other people who look at these people and say, well, look at him, he's rich, he has a Cadillac, they have a yacht, you know, they go to Florida, they go to California, et cetera, but they do nothing themselves.
Right.
But they begrudge the people who have worked, okay? Yeah. Now, there's a balance here, okay? So it's like Obama says, well, let's share the wealth. Well, I work hard, and then the person who wants to sit on his fanny and do nothing, I have to give him part of my income, okay? I don't think that's right, Tony.
No, I don't think so either. I don't think that we want to completely change everything in that sense. We don't want to tax everything away from the wealthy. That's not what I want to see happen in the book. You know, there was a writer for the Rolling Stone magazine who was writing about this issue, and he said, you know, America loves winners. We love people who take risks and create great businesses because then they employ us. And we love our sports teams to win. We love winners. What we don't like are cheaters. And I think that some of what has happened in the last 30 years has unfortunately been that some of the people who are in the 1% have gained their income at the expense of the other 99%. If you go from 1950 to 1980, what happened was everybody grew at roughly the same rate. So when the wealthy were getting more wealth, so were the middle class, so were the poor. Now, not so much.
Okay, but let's go back to 50,
Sure.
80, and let's look at the political scene, and let's look at what they were saying.
Yeah.
Okay, from Eisenhower to Kennedy,
Kennedy and Johnson.
Okay, right.
Right, yeah.
Okay, and to Reagan. Okay, so what in those areas there was a lot of incentive saying, look, we're not going to tax you, we're going to give you the incentives.
Yeah.
To continue to create jobs. Now, if you give me an incentive in my business and I'm making a profit, darn on me if I'm not helping my employees or hiring more people.
Right.
But if you keep on taxing me, I have to say, look, I can't afford these people anymore.
Right.
So there was a different political ideology from 50 to 80. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree, but there were certain things that were different in a different way. From 50 to 80, for example, the 1% did pay higher taxes. Now, I agree that their incentives were different, but part of the reason that their incentives were different, I would argue, is what we talked about earlier in the show, which is that the middle class had a bigger share of the pie, so they were able to buy more products, and so the wealthy were able to create more jobs. That's not happening nowadays. I think that creating jobs comes just as much from creating consumer demand, from making sure that people can buy your products, as it does from keeping taxes low.
Now, I would agree with you in this area. I think God gives us talents, and I think if someone's blessed, they should share that.
Yes.
Okay, in a good way.
Absolutely.
Okay, there are people out there who need it. Okay, I see corporations that are greedy.
Yeah.
I see people who are multimillionaires and they want more money. Okay, they don't want to help the poor. They don't want to clothe the naked. They don't want to make shelter for the homeless. Okay, I think that's a sin.
Yeah.
I think that's a sin, Tony, because I think that if you are blessed, that you should give.
Yeah.
But in the same token, my wife said to me one day, I don't mind putting my hand in my pocket to help somebody. It's when I put my hand in my pocket and I find your hand. She came up with and that's where I think there's the dichotomy that we're looking at, okay? We work so hard, and then, sure, we do want to share it. I would like to see my employees get as much as they could.
Sure.
But you're limited as to what you have to do with your health care, your energy costs, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where I have that concern,
Yeah.
okay? Where does this 1% say, hey, okay, look, the rich do get taxed pretty heavy, okay? Where is this, where do we give? Where does this 1% give?
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I addressed the book to them. A lot of people thought, well, the 1% isn't really going to like this message, right? They're not going to necessarily want to maybe raise taxes on themselves or give more things to the 99%. You should write this as a letter to the 99%. They're the ones who would want to hear this. But I thought, no. What the 1% should be hearing this because I want them to want to give back in exactly the way you're saying. I don't want this to be a revolution where people are taking money away from the 1%. I want the 1% to take it upon themselves to say, if we take a little bit of our wealth and we use it for these projects and we use it to contribute to these political causes, we can help everyone rise at the same rate together. In the same way that Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. I'm saying here's what I think the 1% can do voluntarily for their country.
I couldn't agree with you more. Someone may look at saying that, all of a sudden they want to take what I've worked so hard for, okay? It's how do we find that what we really should do to help, that the greedy don't come in, okay, and take all what we're trying to do, okay? Like the people who are abusing access cards, the people who are not working when they're living off the government, they're living off these people who work. Now, here again, am I anti-access card? Absolutely not.
Right.
Am I anti for people who no. They're the needy. Okay, And I think there's where this letter to the 1% really could make an important impact. Okay?
I agree. I'll tell you one interesting study that I recently read and wrote about for the Huffington Post, where I do some op-eds, is there have been a couple investigations recently into fraud in the food stamp program and the welfare program, and they went through all the programs in the government. And the interesting thing was, they did find that there was fraud, and it's like 1 or 2% of the budget, gets lost to these fraudulent transactions. But the most amount of fraud actually happened for the big corporations who had really good accountants who were hiding stuff, guys like Enron, and that's why I say America doesn't love cheaters. I think we need to crack down on that sort of stuff, and I'm hoping that if more of those people who are running these corporations read a book like Letter to the 1%, they won't want to do that. They won't want to be fraudulent in the way that you and I are talking about.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question when we come back over the break. Okay, do you think the government makes people want to cheat? Hold that thought. We'll be back right after this. I'm talking to Anthony W. Orlando, and his book is Letter to the 1%. Fabulous book, folks. Stay with us. Folks, it's about the letter to the 1%, those people who are filthy rich. My guest today is Anthony W. Orlando. You can get this book. It's fabulous. It's about a great story in economics. Okay, we're talking about, the people that are getting taxed, and, do you think sometimes the government makes people become cheaters?
No, and I'll say why. I don't think that anyone can ever make you cheat. I think that when you decide to do something that hurts someone, you always have the decision to say no. And I think that's an important thing for all of us to remember. But I do think that the government gives a lot of people opportunities to cheat. And you talked about some of the reasons before, in the food stamp program and welfare. We have seen cheating in those programs. Another example is when a lot of these big bills come through Congress, the big corporations who have these lobbyists, the rest of us don't have lobbyists speaking on our behalf, they do. They're in the halls of power, which is why I think they have such a great opportunity to change things for the positive, but instead sometimes they take this opportunity to insert these loopholes that allow them to cheat.
So what does the 99% do?
The 99% runs this economy. I mean, we talk about the 1% running our corporations, but they wouldn't be anywhere with all the people who are making the products and buying the products and doing all the everyday jobs everywhere around here. A couple of years ago, I wrote an op-ed about a man that I'd met who lived in Chicago and was having difficulty getting by, and it was right around Christmas time. And one of the points I was making is there are millions of people like this all around America working, low-wage jobs. In the industrialized world, the United States has the highest share of low-wage jobs. These people are working very hard and trying to get by, but it's so difficult. And this time of year, Christmas time, when we go to the stores and we see people filling our orders and helping us buy that perfect gift for that special someone, it's a good opportunity to remember that they need our help too. We need to be creating a stronger economy for them.
I think that if the government's going to give me an incentive, I think there should be an attachment to that. And the attachment should be, look, Sammy, we'll give you that $50,000 tax benefit, but we want you to create 3 or 4 more jobs from that, okay? Yeah. And I think that if the greedy are out there, well, they have to do something and they have to employ, or give your employees whatever they, there should be some kind of attachment saying, we'll help you, but you have to help other people.
Yeah. I think that's a very good idea. I know there was a very small part of the stimulus program back in 2009 that actually did subsidize companies in that way to create jobs. I would like to see more of that. I would like to see more job creation.
A friend of mine said when the stimulus came out, they gave all these corporations so many millions and billions of dollars. He says, why didn't they just give all the American people, $50,000, but they had to buy all American products with that money. They could not spend it on China or Indonesia. So give all the Americans $50,000, but you cannot, if you're going to buy a car, it has to be American. If you buy appliance, it has to be American. It was like a crazy thought, but when you think about it, say, well, look, when these people have their money, sure, some people would squander it, maybe run down to Mohegan or whatever, and nothing wrong with that. But it's interesting of how these incentives work, But I think we need, first of all, we have to have a good attitude, and we have to start believing in what we are all about. Okay, wouldn't you think so, Tony?
Oh, I think so. You and I have talked about the example that Pope Francis is setting, and how that's a very positive thing for the world, to be inspiring humility, to be inspiring less greed. And in our everyday lives, we all can do that. And Christmas time is the perfect time of year to do that.
I know there's many people around Christmas time that want to do some good, and sometimes they don't want the you know, the accolades. They just want to do some good about it. Well, you know, I'll tell you, I think I'm going to see you on Fox or CNN as an economic advisor. I'll talk to my friend Caputo at Fox and tell him, get Tony Orlando on there. You know, Tony, I got to tell you, you know, you're an inspiration. You come from a great family. You worked hard. You're religious. You know, you have your faith. You practice your faith. And there's not that many people in California are doing that, okay? And I hope it could become contagious, you and Ned Doherty out there.
All right, I'll work on it.
And I wish you only the best.
Thank you.
Okay? My guest is Anthony W. Orlando, folks. He wrote a book, Letter to the 1%. Go to his website, anthonyworlando.com. You'll learn a lot more. You can get the book at amazon.com, barnesandnoble.com. But whatever you do, get the book. It's really fascinating, folks. We'll see you next time.